Pain didn't defeat you, even though it tried in ways no one else could see. It showed up quietly, blending into your routine, disguising itself as normal days and long nights, testing how much you could carry without breaking apart. Pain waited for moments when you were alone, when distractions faded, when honesty became unavoidable. It asked questions you didn't want to answer and reminded you of things you wished you could forget, and still, it didn't win. You felt pain in your body when exhaustion settled into your bones, and in your mind when memories replayed themselves without permission. You felt it in your heart when trust cracked, when expectations collapsed, when people left without explanation or stayed without understanding. Pain taught you how vulnerable you truly are, but it also revealed how resilient you can be. It stripped away illusions and forced you to see what matters when comfort disappears. There were times when pain made you doubt yourself. It whispered that you weren't enough, that you were falling behind, that your effort didn't count because no one applauded it. It convinced you that feeling deeply was a flaw and that silence meant failure. But each time those thoughts appeared, something stronger rose beneath them. Not confidence, not certainty, just endurance, just the decision to keep going without needing to know why yet. Pain changed the way you moved through the world. It slowed you down. It made you more careful with words and more attentive to small moments. It taught you how easily people can be carrying invisible battles and how dangerous assumptions can be. You stopped judging so quickly, you started listening more. Pain didn't harden you, it refined you. You learned that pain doesn't always demand resistance. Sometimes it asks for acknowledgement. Sometimes it asks you to sit still and feel what you've been avoiding. In those moments, you discovered that emotions don't destroy you when you allow them to exist. They pass through you, leaving clarity behind. You learned that running only makes pain louder, while facing it gives you control. Pain introduced you to boundaries. It showed you where you had been giving too much and receiving too little. It revealed patterns you ignored because hope was louder than logic. It forced you to choose yourself without apology. And that choice wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Pain taught you that protecting your peace is not weakness, it's wisdom. You didn't escape pain untouched. You carry marks from it. But those marks are not signs of defeat. They are evidence of survival, evidence that you felt fully and still remained whole. You didn't numb yourself into indifference. You didn't let pain turn you cruel. You learned how to hold it without letting it define you. There were moments when pain isolated you, when words felt insufficient and explanations felt exhausting. In those moments, you learned the power of presence over performance. You learned that you don't owe anyone constant strength. You learned that rest is not quitting. You learned that healing doesn't require an audience. Pain sharpened your sense of truth. You became more honest with yourself about what you can tolerate and what you can't. You stopped chasing validation and started valuing alignment. You realized that peace feels quieter than chaos but lasts longer. Pain helped you recognize that real growth often feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. You are not who you were before pain, and that is not a loss. That is evolution. You carry more awareness now, more depth, more compassion. You understand that life doesn't always give explanations, but it always gives lessons to those willing to look. Pain didn't defeat you because you didn't let it steal your humanity. You still show up, you still care, you still try even when trying feels risky. Pain tested your limits and found something solid beneath them. It found a person who adapts, who reflects, who learns, who continues. You are standing not because pain was absent, but because it failed to take away what matters most from you. You're still here, and that matters more than you think. Not because life became easy, not because everything worked out the way you hoped, but because you stayed when it would have made sense to leave. You breathed when the air felt heavy. You woke up when your heart felt tired of explaining itself to the world. There were nights, hain, you questioned your own worth. Mornings when getting out of bed felt like lifting the weight of an entire lifetime. Moments when silence was louder than any noise you had ever known. And yet, here you are, still standing, still breathing, still choosing to move forward even when forward felt unclear. People see the outside. They see the calm, the smile, the "I'm fine." They don't see the internal negotiations you made just to survive another day. They don't hear the conversations you had with yourself in the dark, where fear spoke first and hope answered quietly. Strength isn't loud. Real strength doesn't announce itself. It shows up when no one is watching, when applause is absent, when encouragement feels distant, when belief has to be borrowed from tomorrow because today has none left. You didn't become strong because you wanted to. You became strong because life gave you no alternative. Loss taught you patience. Disappointment taught you humility. Being misunderstood taught you restraint. Being alone taught you how to listen to your own voice. Every scar you carry is proof that you were tested and you remained human. You didn't turn bitter. You didn't harden your heart beyond repair. You learned how to feel and still function, how to care without guarantees, how to love without control. There were moments you wanted someone to notice, someone to say, "I see you. I know how hard this is." Sometimes that never came, so you became that voice for yourself. You learned how to sit with discomfort without running from it. You learned that healing isn't a straight line and progress doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes progress looks like choosing not to quit. Sometimes it looks like resting without guilt. Sometimes it looks like forgiving yourself for not being perfect. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not weak for feeling deeply. The world often confuses softness with fragility, but softness is what allows you to bend instead of break. It's what keeps you connected to empathy, to compassion, to meaning. You stayed kind even when life wasn't kind to you, and that choice required more courage than anger ever could. Every experience you thought was wasted time was shaping your awareness. Every delay was building patience. Every setback was teaching you what truly matters. You don't need to rush your becoming. You don't need to compare your timeline to anyone else's. Your journey is specific because you are specific. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you notice details others overlook, the way you care even when it hurts, these are not accidents. You survive versions of yourself that you never thought you would outgrow. You learned to let go of expectations that were never yours to carry. You discovered that peace isn't found by fixing everything, but by accepting what cannot be changed and committing to what can. You are still standing because somewhere deep inside you made a promise to yourself, a quiet promise that no matter how heavy life became, you would not abandon who you are. This moment is not random. It's not just another passing second. It's a pause meant to remind you that your presence has value, that your story has weight, that your endurance is meaningful. You didn't come this far to disappear now. You came this far because something in you refuses to surrender to emptiness, because something in you still believes that honesty matters, that love matters, that effort matters, even when results take time. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to prove anything. Being here is already proof. Standing after everything you faced is not ordinary. It's rare. It's earned. It's yours sometimes. Life doesn't warn you. It doesn't knock. It just shows up quietly and changes everything. You may think this moment is ordinary, just another second in a long day. But what if I told you this moment was chosen for you? You've carried weight that no one saw. You kept going when quitting felt easier. You stayed kind in a world that often forgets how to be. And this is not a coincidence. This is a reminder, a pause in the noise, a surprise meant to tell you that you matter more than you believe, that your struggles are not wasted, and that something meaningful is waiting for you because you didn't give up. So take a breath, stay right here. This message, this surprise is just for you. Kindness is quiet. Strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself or ask to be noticed. It shows up in small choices, in pauses before reacting, in restraint when retaliation would feel justified. It lives in the way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening, and in the way you treat others when they can offer you nothing in return. Kindness doesn't need an audience because it isn't a performance. It's a posture. It's how you carry your power without turning it into a weapon. You learn kindness the hard way, not from comfort, but from understanding pain well enough to never want to pass it on. You discovered that cruelty is easy when you're hurt, but kindness requires awareness, patience, and control. It asks you to slow down, to see the human behind the behavior, to remember that everyone is fighting something you can't see. That awareness didn't make you weaker, it made you deliberate. There were moments when kindness felt like a risk, when being open invited disappointment, when empathy wasn't returned, when silence followed your honesty, and still you chose it. Not because it was rewarded, but because it aligned with who you are. You realized that kindness isn't about being agreeable or passive. It's about choosing dignity over dominance, clarity over chaos, respect over reaction. Quiet strength doesn't argue to be right. It listens, it absorbs, it responds only when necessary. You learn that raising your voice isn't the same as raising your standards. You learn that walking away can be more powerful than winning an argument. Kindness taught you when to engage and when to let go, when to speak and when to conserve your energy for things that actually matter. You became kinder to yourself too. That may have been the hardest part. You stopped punishing yourself for mistakes that taught you something. You allowed rest without attaching guilt to it. You recognized that self-respect grows when you treat yourself with the same compassion you offer others. Kindness inward became the foundation for strength outward. People often misunderstand kindness. They mistake it for weakness because it doesn't demand attention. They assume boundaries don't exist because kindness doesn't shout them. But you know better now. You know that kindness without boundaries becomes exhaustion, and boundaries without kindness become isolation. You learned how to hold both at the same time. Kindness sharpened your intuition. It taught you to read rooms, to sense shifts in energy, to notice what's being said without words. It made you observant, thoughtful, present. You learned that presence can be healing, that listening can be more impactful than advice, that showing up consistently means more than grand gestures. You didn't choose kindness because life was gentle with you. You chose it because you understood how damaging the absence of it can be. You became the calm you once needed. You offered patience where you once felt rushed. You gave understanding where you once fell judged. That choice created a kind of strength that doesn't fade under pressure. Kindness didn't make you invisible, it made you grounded. It anchored you when situations tried to pull you into unnecessary conflict. It reminded you that not everything requires your reaction, that not every battle deserves your energy. You learned to save your strength for purpose, not ego. There were days when kindness felt heavy, when carrying compassion felt like carrying weight. On those days, you learned to protect your heart without closing it. You learned to step back without becoming cold. You learned that being kind doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means responding with integrity instead of impulse. Your kindness is not an accident. It's the result of awareness, reflection, and choice. It's the quiet strength that allows you to move through the world without losing yourself to it. It's the reason people feel safe around you without knowing why. It's the reason you can look back at difficult moments and know you didn't betray who you are. If you want, I can continue with keynote 4 in the same exact tone and structure. Growth happens in silence, far away from applause, away from timelines and comparisons, away from the pressure to explain yourself to people who aren't listening. It happens in ordinary days that don't feel meaningful at the time, in routines that look repetitive from the outside, and choices so small they almost seem invisible. You don't wake up one morning, transfer, you become someone slowly, quietly, without witnesses. Most of your growth didn't happen when things were going well. It happened when you were unsure, when you felt behind, when progress was hard to measure. It happened when you kept showing up without motivation, when discipline replaced excitement, when commitment carried you through moments where inspiration disappeared. Silence became the space where you confronted yourself honestly, without distractions, without excuses. In that silence, you learned how to listen, not to noise, not to opinions, but to your own patterns. You noticed what drains you and what restores you. You recognized habits that kept you stuck and beliefs that no longer fit who you were becoming. Growth asked you to unlearn before you could learn again. It asked you to let go of versions of yourself that once kept you safe but now kept you small. No one clapped when you chose consistency over comfort. No one celebrated when you walked away from what was familiar but unhealthy. No one marked the day you decided to stop seeking validation and start trusting your own judgment. Those moments passed quietly, but they shaped you more than any public success ever could. Silence taught you patience. It taught you that real change doesn't rush, that forcing outcomes often creates resistance, that some things unfold only when you stop trying to control every step. You learn to work without immediate results, to invest energy without guaranteed returns, to believe in direction even when the destination wasn't clear. You grew when you stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You grew when you accepted that not everyone needs access to your process. Privacy became protection, boundaries became clarity. You realize that the most important work you do doesn't require approval, only honesty. You learned how to be alone without feeling empty. At first, solitude felt like absence, like something missing, like proof that you had been left behind. Silence amplified your thoughts. Stillness made emotions harder to avoid. Being alone forced you to sit with yourself without distraction, and that wasn't comfortable. Over time, solitude stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like space. Space to think without interruption, space to feel without judgment, space to exist without performing. You realize that being alone doesn't mean being unwanted, it means being undivided. You noticed how much energy you used to spend maintaining connections that drained you, how often you stayed in conversations out of habit rather than interest, how frequently you compromised your truth to preserve comfort. Solitude showed you what peace actually feels like. Being alone sharpened your awareness. You became more selective with your time, more intentional with your attention. You stopped filling silence just to avoid it. You allowed quiet to do its work. In that quiet, clarity emerged. You began to understand your own rhythms. When you need rest, when you need challenge, when you need distance. Solitude helped you recognize these patterns without interference. It taught you self-regulation instead of dependence. Loneliness once made you question your worth. Solitude helped you reclaim it. You stopped equating presence with value. You learned that companionship is meaningful only when it's mutual and respectful. You became comfortable walking alone rather than staying where you felt unseen. This comfort didn't make you disconnected, it made you grounded. When you do connect now, you do it by choice, not by need. You show up whole instead of hoping someone else will complete you. Solitude also taught you compassion. You realized how many people avoid being alone because they haven't learned how to sit with themselves. That understanding softened your judgment. It deepened your empathy. You no longer rush to fill every gap. You trust pauses. You allow moments to unfold without forcing them. Solitude trained you to wait without anxiety, to exist without urgency. Being alone is no longer something you fear, it's something you understand. It's a place you can return to when the world becomes loud, when expectations pile up, when clarity feels distant. In that place, you find yourself again, steady, present, complete. You no longer chase approval, and that shift changed the way you move through the world. There was a time when being accepted felt like safety, when validation felt like proof that you were doing something right. You measured yourself through reactions, through responses, through how others perceived you. Over time, that measurement became exhausting. It placed your worth in hands that didn't always know how to hold it. Letting go of approval wasn't sudden. It happened gradually, through disappointment, through realizing that pleasing everyone often meant abandoning yourself. You noticed how quickly opinions changed, how inconsistent praise could be, how silence didn't always mean failure. Those observations didn't make you bitter. They made you honest. You began to ask different questions. Not do they like this, but does this align with me? Not will this be accepted, but will I respect myself after this? Those questions redirected your energy inward. They simplified decisions that once felt complicated. They gave you clarity where confusion used to live. You learned that approval often comes with conditions. Be this, not that. Say this, not too much. Fit here, but don't stand out there. You recognized those conditions as limitations, not guidance. You chose to step outside them, even when it meant being misunderstood. Releasing approval didn't isolate you. It refined your connections. The people who stayed weren't there for performance. They were there for truth. That truth allowed you to breathe easier, to speak more clearly, to exist without constant adjustment. You stopped explaining yourself to people who had already decided who you were. You conserved your energy. You invested it in growth and consistency, in showing up fully rather than impressively. That investment returned something more stable than praise. Without approval as your compass, you developed direction. You trusted your judgment more. You accepted that mistakes are part of learning. Not evidence of incompetence. You allowed yourself to be seen imperfectly instead of curated perfectly. This shift didn't make you indifferent. You still care. You just care selectively. You care about integrity. You care about alignment. You care about impact over image. That selectivity protects your peace. You realize that self-respect feels quieter than approval, but lasts longer. Approval fades when trends change or attention moves on. Self-respect stays. It informs how you speak, how you choose, how you walk away when necessary. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You choose. That choice doesn't need agreement to be valid. It doesn't need applause to be real. It's grounded in awareness. And awareness doesn't ask for permission. By stepping away from approval, you stepped closer to yourself, and that closeness gave you something no external validation ever could. Stability rooted in truth, not reaction. This is where you begin again, not from nothing, but from experience. Beginning again doesn't mean you failed before. It means you learned enough to choose differently now. You're not starting over as the same person. You're starting with memory, with awareness, with lessons that cost you something. That cost gave the lessons weight.